Hey everybody, welcome to the High Performance Zone. Today is my most favorite, most impactful, best podcast we've ever given. And this is why. We're about to go on a journey. I have Dr. Gillian Mandich, and what we talk about is happiness. And she is diving deep into how to create fulfillment in your life, the meaning behind it. We actually talk deeply about a sense of awe and how to create awe in your life. This is deep, it's powerful, and we have the happy honey. We talk about hunting for happiness. So you'll learn the most you've ever learned, I think, when it comes to the science of happiness, but more importantly, how to apply it in your life. So let's dive in with Gillian and Gucci. Ready? Hit it. Hey everybody, welcome to the zone. I am so excited because I have Dr. Gillian Mandich. Now, Gillian, you are an expert on happiness, and you and I are going to just go off because that is one of my passions in life. You have a quote that says, "There is no secret to happiness, but there is a science to it." Tell me more about that. And first off, welcome to the High Performance Zone.
Thank you. I am so happy to be in the zone here with you. I am talking about happiness, and happiness research is one of the things that makes me happiest. So thank you for inviting me today to have this conversation, because like you said, it's interesting. I'm a happiness researcher. Okay. And the number one question I get asked when I tell people that I'm a happiness researcher is they're like, okay, Gillian, like, what's the one thing, right? Like, what's the magic pill? What's the one thing I need to do or buy or get or say in order to be happy? And the truth is there's no magic pill. There's no secret. But like you said in my quote, there is a science to it. Just like we can apply scientific principles to learn about health in the body, to learn about nutrition, to learn about disease in the body, we can apply some of that rigor to learn more about happiness. And what we know from research is that although the whole field of happiness research is relatively new, what we do know is that there's in terms of our sort of total capacity for happiness, there's three big players. So the first is genetics. Okay. The second is environment. And the third piece is the piece that's up to us. So it's our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. And when we think about, what's amenable to change, we can't change our genes, right? Maybe gene expression a little bit, but it's difficult. Environment, I think we can all, living through this pandemic, appreciate what an effect our environment has on our happiness. And we can change our environment, but it's very difficult to pack up and move, for example. But when we think about what's going on in our head and what we're doing and how we're showing up every day, our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors, when we focus on that, we can actually not only increase our happiness short term, but we can sustain it at higher levels. And so the science of happiness and my work and my research really focuses on this third piece, our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. And what can we do to actually apply what we learn to make meaningful change in our life? Because, I believe we do get one shot at life. And I believe that I want to take the best shot possible. And so everything that I do in all of my work is really focusing on how do we live the best life ever? How do we turn the volume up on life? How do we live life in high definition? And how do we really make the most out of this human experience?
I just love your passion. Okay, you can tell that you're excited about this, and I am too. This is what's gonna make it fun. I always have a kind of an I am statement, and part of my I am statement is to live life in all its fullness, which is what I just heard you say, right? I mean, why not live it in all its fullness, which includes the happiness side? Hey, first off, where are you right now?
I am in downtown Toronto, Canada.
Well, I know. And I heard you talking with my producer before we started jumping on here. Tell me about the windows and writing on your windows, because this is so cool. I was blown away.
Yeah. So, I think, and I come from an academic background. So I have a PhD. I spent 11 years at university studying. So my thinking is very linear. It's very scientific, right? It's very X to Y to Z. And one of the things that I've been working on these past few years, I finished my PhD in 2019.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I've been really leaning into the creativity and getting to know that. So I've, the left and the right side. So I've been really focusing on my right side of my brain. And one of the things, I live in a condo in downtown Toronto, and I have floor to ceiling windows, and I'm high. And my view is, we have, it's called Toronto Islands. We have a Great Lake right on our coast here. And then there's this cute little island that has an airport called it's like a small little airport. Yep. And I love to I ordered these markers that you can write on windows with and you can erase it. It's not permanent. And I ordered all sorts of colors. I ordered neon, I ordered pastels, I ordered metallic markers, and I write on my windows. And it helps me. I write, values, things that inspire me, things when I'm working through something in my mind. And my backdrop is I see planes taking off and landing at the airport. And it's just the most beautiful way to really tap into my creativity, to get it out, but just the energy around it. And I get beautiful sunrises and sunsets as well. So the background to have this creative expression is really something that helps me sort of formulate my thoughts and take what I learn in my sort of linear left brain mind, and then integrate it with the real world, because the real world is not so linear, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, so many cool things. So first off, I love the idea of creativity. I actually, as a pilot, you tend to think you're very linear, and I am. I was brought up an engineer. And so whenever anybody says, well, are you creative? Initially, my reaction was, well, no, that's not my specialty. Then I realized that was a limiting belief. Actually, we're all very creative, right? And how you define being creative, like on the Blue Angels, putting a new maneuver in, or even, now we're creating products and courses for people. I know you got a great course coming out. So there's so much on creativity that I love that you're tapping into. And then it's around happiness and helping people too, right? But let me give you a very quick story. You ready for this?
Yes.
Toronto. I know exactly where you live because I was on the Carrier Enterprise. This is back in 1988, okay? And we had just filmed the movie Top Gun. Did you ever see that movie?
I love Top Gun. I watch it every year when we have the air show. It's part of my tradition for the air show. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was wondering from your view, if you can see the air show. I know you can, right?
I have the most spectacular view of the air show. And what's really neat is the couple days before, as you know, you practice, right? So it's not the actual air show. And right. I always know the air show's coming because I'll look out my window and I feel like I'm in Top Gun. I'll see like a big jet going across.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I guess it's the air show.
Well, the Toronto Air Show is one of the biggest. It's such a great thing. I remember flying through buildings like that and being lower and looking up at people like yourself and waving at them, right? And they've got their noses put on the window, waving down. And it's such a great experience to be able to share that joy. I think about, happiness. It was really a deep fulfillment. And we'll get into the levels of happiness, right? I want to talk about, like you said, short-term and long-term, how we create that. But I remember Toronto extremely well. It was funny. I was on the aircraft carrier and there was a message just back in the days before email. And they sent a message out that said, you're doing an air show, they're looking for some airplanes. And so I actually put in a request. I'm in the middle of the Indian Ocean to fly to Toronto to be in an air show. We landed, the week I landed, got back in San Francisco, I flew my jet into that air show. So I remember where you are. Yeah.
That's that was so cool.
There's so many fun things. Okay. Hey, back to happiness though. I want to really jump into some critical elements. So, when you, first off, giving your background on your studies, why did you pick happiness?
Ooh, this is a good question. Because, I look at where I am right now researching happiness, and I have to say, I'm so happy. I love what I do. Every single day, my work doesn't feel like work. But at the same time, when I reflect, it's not like I sat down in high school with my guidance counselor and said, when I grow up, I want to study happiness. Like, full honesty, I didn't even know you could research happiness. So my original plan, I was always really good at math and science. And so when you're in high school and you're good at math and science, your guidance counselors tell you to go be a medical doctor, right? And I've always had a passion for health and wellness. So I did an undergraduate degree in health science with the intention of going to medical school. And then when I finished, I decided I wanted to work for a year before starting medical school because I wanted to get a little bit of real world experience. I was feeling a little bit young. I had never done anything but be in school. So I thought I'm going to take a year and I'm going to just get some real world experience and then go back to medical school, start medical school. And I ended up getting a job. This is like, do you remember Workopolis? When you could like apply for jobs on Workopolis? It was like way before LinkedIn. It was like this old way you could apply for jobs. Anyway, so I ended up getting a job. I applied to any job that had the word health in the title, basically in London, Ontario, where I was from. And I ended up getting a job in public health at the health unit. And I was in the research department. And throughout that year, I started to realize I'm a very curious person. Like if you ask any of my friends, they will tell you that I ask so many questions, sometimes to like an annoying level, because I'm curious. And so I realized that with health, I could still have my passion for health, but instead of being a medical doctor, I could be a researcher and I could learn more about health. I could ask questions. And at the time when I was at the health unit, I was doing a lot of work with diabetes and obesity with children and families. And so I went back to do a master's degree and I did that. I focused in health science, but in child and youth health, and was studying childhood obesity and diabetes. And I went right into my PhD. And then in year 2 of your PhD, you have to do what are called comprehensive exams. It's like the worst 3 months of your life. You're given a topic, you have to learn everything about it. And so my topic was parent and family focused childhood obesity interventions, because when you involve the entire family, it's much more efficacious than just focusing on the child. It makes sense, right? Because parents are the gatekeepers for so much for children. And what I used for inclusion in my study was BMI, body mass index, which is used calculated with height and weight. That's it. And I started thinking to myself, the number on a scale doesn't necessarily indicate health, right? You can be living in a larger body, living with obesity, and metabolically be healthy. And you could not be living with obesity and be unhealthy. So I thought, why am I using weight, the number on a scale, as a metric to help people? And also, when you look at these childhood obesity interventions and you look at like a 6 or a 12-month follow-up, like after the study's over, what happens 6 months or a year down the road, basically, as soon as you remove the intervention, most people go back to doing what they were doing before. So I had this feeling of futility in what I was doing. And also this, because I wanted to be a professor. My mom's a professor and I thought she had the best job. So I was sort of going through the motions of school to get the letters after my name to do what I wanted to do. And I thought, why would I do that? Why would I be paying so much money, investing so much time, energy, just to go through the motions? And so I took a step back and I thought maybe I should take a leave from school for a little bit. And then I was at Pilates one day, where like all good things happen at Pilates, right?
Yeah, I love Pilates.
There was a woman next to me that made this like off comment. It's funny, you never know what one thing you say to somebody that can completely change their life, right? And she said to me, Gillian, why don't you go to the business school? Because she was a professor at the business school. And she said, why don't you come to the business school? You seem entrepreneurial. Or why don't you check out my sister's work? She's at Acadia, which is a university on the East Coast of Canada. And she studies sustainable happiness. And I said, what's sustainable happiness? And she's like, go home and look into it. So I did. And I went down a massive PubMed rabbit hole, reading all this research. I became like obsessed with learning about it. I didn't know you could study happiness. And then when I got into the research and I started reading things like when you compare happy people to unhappy people, happy people have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. They have stronger immune systems. They heal faster from injury. They tend to make better nutritional choices. They tend to sleep better, both in terms of duration and quality. And the list goes on. And I thought, essentially in an obesity intervention, my goal is health, right? I'm trying to promote health and wellness. Happiness, when you promote that, you're going after the same goal, just from a different angle. It's more inclusive. You ask everybody, they all want to be happy, right? And also it takes the weight, the question of the number on a scale, completely out of the equation. And so I completely switched topics halfway through my PhD. It added an extra year to my studies, but I am just so grateful that off comment it truly changed my life. And so now I feel so blessed to be able to every single day really study and focus on what are those things that can make us happy and how do we improve happiness in our life.
So let's dive into some of those, because your research, but before I want to just acknowledge what you said, how a comment, especially from somebody who you respect, can really change your life, and both in a good and a bad way, right? I think about the idea. I remember when I was in high school and I had my algebra teacher, whatever, and he said, hey, what school are you going to go to? And I said, well, I want to go to the Naval Academy. And he goes, well, why do you want to go there? He says, why don't you go to a small school and you can be, because I was playing football at the time. He says, you could be a big star at a small school. And I thanked him and I said, but in my mind, I was like, no, I'm not going to be trapped by your limiting belief. I can play football at a big school too, which as a small guy, by the way, was a challenge. But I really like that you took it to a positive way. Someone said something, hey, what do you think about this? And it opened up your entire world, right? And I'm thinking about people who are listening, right? Being
Mhm.
aware that our words matter, right? You know, what we say to people and trying to be positive, right? Don't be that limiting belief. Let's put liberating beliefs in people.
I love that. Liberating beliefs. I've never heard that contrasted with limiting beliefs. I love that. It's so true because everything that we say, the perspective or the lens that we view it through shapes what we see.
Yeah.
And our language is such an important part in giving that context and description to things. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Go back into the lens of everything, what you just said. It shapes everything we do, we see, and we think shapes the world we see. What does that mean to you?
You know, I actually, on my second screen on my computer, I have a quote, and I heard Wayne Dyer say it, but I don't know if he's the originator of the quote. And it says, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are."
Oh, I didn't know he said that.
So I've heard him say that, but I think it's from somewhere else too. But I heard him say it in person one time in Montreal, and I wrote it down. And I think about that because it's true, right? We see things, our entire history, every single thing that we have done up until this point, every experience that we've had, every encounter, every challenge that we've faced, how we've overcome it, all of these things shape who we are and what we see. And I think that, you know, we can choose to become a narrator in our story, or we can let this be a passive person that lets the story happen to us. And so for me, having the intentionality of reminding myself that how I see things is affecting what I see is really profound because it is more expansive. And it also gives me some perspective and humility because I'm not always right either. And I think as a scientist, one of the things is that, you know, being open to different things and different perspectives and recognizing that my view is just one view of many views. And my view is shaped by my life. And so is other people's. And that's why I love meeting people and having conversations and learning different perspectives and asking questions, because that's how we expand our view. And that's how we grow. And that's how we can help each other to really see things from a broader perspective. Because when we talk, I bring my experiences, you bring yours, and we're able to sort of come together and learn from each other. And, you know, if you're listening right now, it's the exact same thing. You're bringing your context of what you have lived to this conversation. And then collectively, we sort of have this opportunity to all learn from each other.
Yeah, here's another quote you can put into that, because I love that. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Yeah.
I love that. It comes from a philosophy that I believe strongly, and that's the world is coming from us, not at us.
I just got truth bumps.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's good.
Truth bumps. So not goosebumps, truth bumps?
Truth bumps. Like, you know, when you hear something and it just like, it hits you like truth,
Yeah.
right? Truth. And you get goosebumps too, but it's like, truth is truth, you know, no matter who says it or whatever, when certain things land, we know it and we feel it. It's like a visceral thing in our body. And it's like a remembering, right? That's how I see it. I see a lot of these things as a remembering. And I just, what you said. Can you say it one more time, please?
Yeah. The world's not coming at us. It's coming from us. So the world is coming from us, not at us.
I love it. Oh, I just wanted that to sink in a little more. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a deep philosophy, right? More than anything, right? Because the idea here is what you're talking about is that how we perceive the world, you could say, okay, I'm perceiving something coming this way, but in reality, it's not, right? It's your perceptions are based on a lot of of what you have seen. It's coming from your mind, your thoughts, your kind of things. I'll give you a really quick example that a really great teacher taught me once. So real quick, what is this to you?
Pen.
A pen. Okay. So, and it writes, it looks like a pen and all that. By the way, I know your doggy is sitting at your feet because you told me that. What's your doggy's name?
Jocko.
Jocko. So if I were to show this to Jocko, what do you think Jocko would do?
Chew it. He would chew it for sure.
He'd chew it. It'd be in his mouth. I got pictures. By the way, I've got Ruby, my Rhodesian Ridgeback. She's sleeping at my feet, right on the sheepskin. And same thing. I've actually practiced this with her. I've given it to her, and I'll try to find you a picture. I'll send it to you where she's like, and actually she broke it and got she got the ink on the rug. Oh well, that's my fault. But the point was chew time. Now here's the question: who's right?
Yeah.
right? So who's right? And then you do this. If you were to go out of the room and Jocko would go out of the room, so all the humans go out of the room, all the dogs go out of the room, and we leave this object in the room, what is it then? Mm-hmm. And what it really is full potential, right? It's potential, because when the dog comes back in the room, the dog sees it as a chew toy and grabs it. We come back in the room, we see it as a pen. So to me, that is a proof that the world's coming from us, not at us. Otherwise, we'd be forced to see this as one thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah. What does that mean to you? What does that mean?
I love this. So one of the things I was telling you about, sort of learning to tap into my creativity and the less linear thinking. So another thing that I've been doing lately is I've been reflecting on these, I think it's called a cone. It's Koan. Zen. It's a Zen cone. It might be a coon. I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but basically it's these thoughts and you think about them. So like this morning I was reflecting on one, and it was like, so we know the sound of two hands clapping, right? What's the sound of one hand?
Right. This is another great metaphor. Yeah, go for it.
And I'm so really, I think what you're saying and this idea of expansive thinking is, I think we want to, as humans, create certainty and label things and understand things and put them in these nice little boxes so that we can understand. But the reality is we have no idea what's going on. And even if we have a sense of certainty, it's a false sense of certainty, because we have no idea what is going to happen tomorrow. And so a lot of what you're saying is the same sort of thing that I've been reflecting on, which is like, how do we expand what we think? How do we go beyond what we think we know into that place of more knowledge? It's like the more that we know, what happens is as we learn more, it expands the perimeter of what we don't know, right? And we keep stepping into places that we didn't know before. And that's part of the journey. And that's the beautiful part. And I love this, because this is the juicy part of life, the learning and the growing. And that's the thing with happiness too, right? Happiness is not a destination. Like we often hear people say, like, I will be happy when, like, fill in the blank, when I have X amount of dollars, when I have this car, when I'm a size whatever it is, when I'm married or divorced. But that's not how happiness works, right? We don't arrive at happiness. We're not like, okay, I reached happiness. It's just like our thinking. We don't take our pens and this one's actually a writing instrument. It's fancy. So they don't call it a pen. They call it a writing instrument. Okay. But however we label this, it's sort of containing it. And so being okay with being in that space of expansiveness, of growth, that's where happiness is, right? We often think like, if I work really hard one day, I'll be successful and then I'll be happy. But you can't, that's not how it works. You're not miserable, grinding, arrive at whatever success is, however you define it. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm happy. It doesn't work like that. And so learning to be in those uncomfortable places, whether it be in this place of expanding my thinking beyond how do I see this pen or this person or this, whatever it is. And also expanding our thinking about how we show up every day in our life and what are we doing that brings us joy and happiness. All of those things help us to bring us into the moment and into the full human experience, because that's where happiness lives, is in the now, not in trying to box it up and bottle it up and contain it, right?
Oh, I'm with you. So let's go into the science, because I don't have the privilege that you have, but you've studied this, right? So I'm thinking a couple questions here. I love your curiosity, and you can take the one that you think is most meaningful for our audience. So you mentioned earlier that there's short-term and long-term benefits to happiness. So maybe we could unpack those, right? And I was also thinking about, if someone were to say, what are the top 3 benefits of happiness? What are they, and what's your proof of that? So over to you.
Yeah. And I love that you asked this question, because this is something I get asked a lot, because we're just not used to it, right? Like it's weird to have this idea of studying happiness. And one of the things that I will say, in my experience as a happiness researcher, one of the silver linings that I feel has come from this pandemic is that before the pandemic started, I do a lot of like public speaking and teaching and lecturing about the science of happiness. And I would basically have to go in and start my talk by saying, I have a PhD in health science. Health promotion is my area of focus. Happiness and health are highly correlated. Here's all the benefits. And then I would talk about the benefits in terms of physical health, like I talked about. Yeah. And then I would talk about the benefits in the workplace, right? So what we see when we compare happy people to unhappy people is that in a workplace setting, happy people are more collaborative. They're better problem solvers. They're more creative. They're better team players. They tend to make more money. They get better evaluations from their supervisors. They have better relationships with their clients, their customers, and their colleagues. So from a work perspective, we see benefits. And then also in our personal life, right? Where we see that happy people, again, when we compare them to unhappy people, they have longer and more fulfilling marriages and friendships. They're more altruistic. So they're more likely to volunteer both their time and or their money to help with their community. They're more involved. So those three areas in particular are major areas where we see, and we have really good data to show the benefits. So I would start my talk with that. And I would essentially like a lawyer, right? I build my case as to why happiness was so much more than like a smiley face emoji, which is what a lot of people think. And I don't blame them, right? Because we're never taught. And then since the pandemic, my conversations have changed because we have changed, right? So now it's not, this is why happiness is important. People are saying, I get it. We are living, whether it's ourselves or our colleagues or our family, we are living and breathing mental health in a way that we have never done before. And so now the question isn't, why do I care? It's, what do I do about it? And we can enter the conversation there. And that progress to me is something that is really exciting. And especially for someone that I do a lot of corporate work, a lot of corporate consulting going in corporations, there's been a massive shift that I have seen where employers are now recognizing that our employees they don't just come in, work their 8 hours and then go home. Our life, the boundaries of our life are very blurry and we don't operate in silos. And so when we focus on our happiness and our mental health in the workplace, not only do we see better outcomes for employees at work, but also in all the other areas of their life. And so, to know that not only does it feel good to be happy in the moment, but we can actually have tangible outcomes, whether that be outcomes that translate into even dollars, right? Or it translates into quality of life or duration of life. We know that when we compare happy people to unhappy people live longer. Like longevity is a piece of it too. Both like in terms of longevity, in terms of life, but also quality years of life, right? Healthy years of life where we're actually able to show up and to move in our bodies the way we want to move. So it's so amazing. And I also love that happiness is one thing, but it has such far-reaching benefits into so many areas. Like the benefits extrapolate into other areas. And not only that, but what we also know from research from Harvard is that our happiness spreads 3 degrees from us. So a lot of times people will say, I don't want to focus on my happiness, Gillian, because I'm not a selfish person, right? I want to take care of my kids. I want to take care of my parents. I want to take care of my partner. And once they're good, then I'll focus on myself. And what we know from the research is that it's absolutely one of the most selfless things. Yeah. Happiness is not a luxury. It is a non-negotiable. It is something that really, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? We can't give what we don't have. And so when we focus on our happiness, not only does it affect our physical health, how we show up at work, how we show up in our relationships, but that spreads 3 degrees from us. So the people that we meet and then the people that they meet. And when we think about a lot of the really hard, difficult, challenging things that are going on in the world right now, my mind goes to the Buddha, right? Like be the change we wish to see in the world. Yeah. And so one of the things that we can do is focus on and prioritize our happiness, because when we do that, we're better for it, but so are the people that we meet and the people that they meet. And to me, that ripple, that halo, that sort of butterfly effect of that is something that is so profound and is something that is manageable and is accessible, right? It's not this like esoteric thing that maybe one day down the road. No, we can do something about it today. And when we do, it can make a really meaningful difference in our lives and in the lives of people we care about.
Okay, let's dive into some tools, but I'll give you a stat here that hasn't been put out in the research yet, but I've been working with this one company for now 84 straight weeks, okay? And we do a once a week leadership meeting with their team. And it started off with first high performance and goals and all that, but it really moved into wellness very quickly, right? And we talk about gratitude, we talk about wellness, and we get them to connect and then align and commit and all this. Turns out the CEO just told me this a couple weeks ago. She was measuring, because they're a health organization, was measuring the amount of pharmaceuticals that a lot of her people were on because of the crisis, right? Mm-hmm. And it dropped 80% after going through this program. 80% of the people were off the pharmaceuticals. And I'm not saying that you should go off. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that, right? But they were able to talk about mental health and then use it long term. And this one lady tells a story where she got in a car accident, right? And we teach breathing and some meditation concepts, right? And she gets in a car accident, and at first she, it went to this state of panic and fear, and she was able to use the trainings that we went through about connecting with your breath to calm down in that situation. So that's a real-time example that I just had with a real organization 2 weeks ago. Give me some of what are you seeing? What's the results of this work?
Yeah, and I love that you brought up this idea of pharmaceuticals, because I get asked that a lot, especially with the pandemic and everything, and what we know from research is that a lot of times when we look at interventions comparing pharmaceuticals to exercise interventions, exercise can be as, if not more effective than a pharmaceutical, not always. So the way I see about it is like this. I think about like a house, right? If you want to build a house, you need all the things. You need doors and windows and bricks and cement. And if you don't have any bricks or you don't have any windows, you can't build your house, right? And sometimes, like, if our body isn't producing the precursor to dopamine, or the receptor for serotonin isn't able to receive the information correctly, there is absolutely a time and a place. And at the same time, when we're asking if this is something we should consider, and that's a conversation to have with our doctor, the other things to consider are, how much sleep are you getting? What does your diet look like? Are you moving your body every day? What are you listening to? Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are you reading? And all of these pieces are also important elements. And so I think that, especially for a lot of people, if we really take an honest look at that and start to focus on some of those kind of things, we know that all of these health promoting wellness behaviors contribute to our mental health as well, right? It's not separate from our physical health. They're very interrelated. That being said, go ahead.
Well, another stat, I mean, it's just amazing that we're having this conversation today, because I was just working with Mayo 2 days ago, and it was the Mayo in Jacksonville, and was talking with one of the top doctors, researchers in women's health, and just health and wellness in being, right? And she said just what you were saying. She says, our physical, the mental, exercise, wellness, like you said, eating well, is half the battle. That was her exact words, half the battle. And so it doesn't matter, in my mind, what quote illness we're dealing with, right? It's so true that, these are one of those truths. Like, I just got the truth bumps, right? That you just taught me, because it's kind of obvious on the outside, but we sometimes forget just how important what you're talking about is for our health. And then you mentioned longevity, quality of life, right? So let's go into some tools, okay? Because you've sold me and the audience. We all know this happiness, wellness is so important. What do people do? What do you recommend when you do a program? What do you have them do?
So number one, before we get into even what we do, I like to start with what's in our head.
Great.
And our thoughts, because a lot of, like we talked about earlier, our thoughts shape our experience and our reality of our world. And so number one is, I think a lot of times what we don't realize is that we were never taught how to be happy. Like, when you were in school, did you have a happiness course? No, right? I didn't. But we learned math and we learned science, but number one, we were never taught how to be happy. So if we're not happy now, no wonder. We were never taught. So we give ourselves that grace. And now we realize that we have this opportunity to learn something. And not only do we have to learn what happiness really is, right? We often think it's a destination, like I talked about, but we also, another element is unlearning what we sort of by mental osmosis took on as what happiness is, from advertising, from movies, from TV, from social media, right? We're taught, we see these ads for these really fit, attractive people in beautiful cars and beautiful homes on vacations. And we think that that's what happiness is. So number one, it's really taking a step back and recognizing that that's not what happiness is, right? That's the more hedonic piece of happiness. But when we think about happiness, and it's also really interesting, is that we didn't have to start our chat today defining happiness, right? And yet, if I was to ask you how to define happiness, or if you are listening or watching right now, and I asked you how to define happiness, we would have 3 different answers. And if Sugar was on, he would have another answer too, right? Producer, we would all do. But yet, happiness is universal. So the definition of the happiness that I often use, because when you're a happiness researcher, this becomes extremely complicated, because at the beginning of any research study, you have to define your terms, right? You have to give operational definitions. So the one that I use it comes from Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky, and it's commonly cited in the literature, is the experience of joy, contentment, and positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. So I wanted to share that because when we unpack it, we sort of see that there's two pieces, right? Joy, contentment, positive well-being. That's how we feel in the moment, right? That is the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll. That is walking out of a yoga class on a bliss cloud. That is getting a Super Bowl, a touchdown at the Super Bowl and doing an end zone dance. That's the in the moment. But then there's this other piece, right? Which is more the longevity piece, the sense that one's good is meaningful, worthwhile, legacy, purpose. And when we think about sort of the more eudaimonic sense of happiness, it involves that. And what we know from research is that there are things that we can do to really focus on, especially that bigger piece, right? Because, we all could go out today and get a dopamine hit, right? Put a post on social media, get a bunch of likes, go out and buy some chocolate cake, whatever it is, those things. But it's more than that as well. And so some of the things I think in terms of the other thing I talked about earlier, how people want this magic pill, right? For happiness. There's not, but the hard thing about happiness is, and this is actually something I am personally really struggling with right now. We chatted earlier, I'm working on a book, right?
Yep.
I'm really struggling to write a book because of the fact that I find the idea about writing a book telling people how to be happy disempowering when you unpack it, because I would have to write a different book for every single person, because we're all different and our formulas we might have similarities or commonalities, and we can talk about some of those, but it's different. And it's also different if I think about what made me happy when I was 16 versus now versus when I'm 100. It changes. So it's not even just like you get this formula, you figure it out and you're done. It's this iterative, ongoing process and change. So the other piece of it is nobody can actually tell us what makes us happy but us, right? And so a lot of the work around happiness, people just want you to tell them what to do, but it's the inner work that has to happen. It's us having to get to know ourselves. It's us having to answer that question for ourselves. And as simple as it seems, like what makes me happy, that question for a lot of people is extremely difficult to answer, right? It's like, I remember before COVID, when I used to be able to do research in person with people, a lot of times I would ask participants either doing an interview or in a focus group setting. And I would say, are you as happy as you think you possibly could be? I've asked hundreds and hundreds of people. I've never had anybody say yes to me yet. Wow. So we all think we can be happier. And I mean, I know that I can. And I'm a happiness researcher, right? And the second follow-up question is always, I'll say, okay, well, what makes you happy? Yeah. And then how like when you start to notice patterns, you start to think, right? Because you're like, wow, there's So I noticed a pattern that when I asked that question, what makes you happy? One of two things happened over and over and over again. So either before they started their exhale, they were giving me an answer. My mom, my dog, my cat, my sister, my brother, like they didn't even think about it. It was like a reflex. The response was reflexive. Or there was like a really long pause. They really had to think about it. And I thought, okay, so we're not as happy as we think we possibly could be, but we don't know what makes us happy either, because it's just a reflex and it's an instinctive thing. We're not putting a lot of cognition behind actually giving our answer, or we don't know the answer and we have to think about it. And the first step to any behavior change is awareness, right? We can't change what we don't know. And so step number one, when we think about happiness, is really starting to ask ourselves that question. What is it that makes me happy? And it can be hard to do. So one of the activities that I like to encourage people to do, I call it happy hunting because I love alliteration, but basically it's a simple activity where you take your pen, if you want to label it as that, and your paper, and you have two columns, or you can do it on your phone or on your computer and just have more happy and less happy. And then as you go through the day, every single activity that you do, when you're done, you check in for a second. How do I feel? Do I feel more happy or less happy? And then at the end of the day, or if you're someone like me that like loves data, maybe do it for 2 or 3 days, get a richer data set. You have a column of things that made you more happy and things that made you less happy. Yeah. And that's a great place to start, to have that awareness and then think, okay, what's in the more happy column that I can do more of?
Yeah.
And what's in the less happy column that I can do less of, or less frequently, or less often, or spend less time thinking about, or removing altogether, maybe deleting, right? Sometimes making us happy, doing things, deleting things can actually make us happy too, right? So I think that's a good place to start, is really asking ourselves that question, because as simple as it is, we're so busy in our life and we don't actually often take the time to think about that question, you know?
It's so many brilliant points I want to allude to. But the last comment, I love your idea, this happiness index. What'd you call it? Happiness what?
Happy hunting, because
Happy
you're trying to
hunting.
figure it out, right?
Yeah, that's cool. That's even better. Yeah, how do I feel, more or less? What's interesting is it reminds me of the philosophy, and you quoted the Buddha earlier. I'll quote him also, where they said, "What what are you here to teach? And why are you even in the world?" And he said, "To teach you what to take up and what to give up." Right? Which is exactly what you just said. Right? It's okay. Let's define. What is it that's not making me happy or is not good for me? There's lots of different definitions there. And so maybe we should be doing less of that, or actually none of some of that stuff, right? And then what can I take up? What can give me that long term? By the way, your definition of happiness, by that, what was the doctor's name again that you quoted?
Sonia Lyubomirsky. She wrote a book called The How of Happiness. If you're interested in more of the research piece, her book is really good.
That's great. I mean, I can't wait to dive in, but to me, the word that came to my mind is fulfillment. If we're seeking fulfillment, which I define as a purpose higher than self. You mentioned purpose, and I think purpose is great. In fact, they've done actuarial tables. I don't know if you've seen this in your research. I was at an event. It was an insurance company. By the way, Toronto, you got a ton of insurance companies.
We do, yeah.
Ton of financial services companies. And I think it was there, and I was listening to another speaker talk, and the comment they made was that when people retire, quote, now I have to put that in quotes, but and if they don't have a purpose, that their actuarial tables, they actually will be dead in 3 years. That's what the stats say. And then if your partner or spouse dies within that time frame, it accelerates 50%, right? Now, and then what they said is, okay, well, that's what the data is showing us. But what's interesting is that purpose doesn't have to be some big thing, right? But there's something you have to be focused on, like your grandkids. If let's say you want to just focus on them, boom. But so it's important in our lives to have focus and purpose. And I suggest that it needs to be larger than self, because otherwise you get caught in that hedonistic way, right? Now, have you researched this? Because I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's my experience.
Yeah. So I actually do a lot of media segments in Canada around the science of happiness. And I did an entire segment on this Japanese concept called ikigai. And it's not only fun to say ikigai, but essentially ikigai, because Japanese do not have a word in their language for retirement. They don't have that concept.
Okay.
Their ikigai is their purpose, and it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to work. Like you said, it could be a hobby, it could be your family. And so for them, they don't see the end of work as the end. Like a lot of people, especially in a North American culture, we have this idea of like retirement, and then like our work is done and we can go lay on a beach, right? And retire. And
which, by the way, I've tried. It's not very fulfilling. Okay. I just can't not do something. I mean, I would be a terrible trust funder. You have the word, the trust funder, meaning you don't need to work. You have all the money you need. That just totally does nothing for me, but keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because if that's all that we have, and if money is all that we need, then money would be able to buy happiness. And that's not the case. What we know from research is that until our basic needs are met, yes, absolutely, money impacts, right? If we are worried about how we're paying our mortgage or our rent or how we're putting food on the table, absolutely. But then from there, more money doesn't bring more happiness. And so it's more than that. And that's where this conversation about purpose, fulfillment, longevity, how we show up in the world, all of these elements come in, because like you said, a lot of our happiness is greater than ourselves. And in fact, research out of Harvard, this is one of the longest running studies they've done. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And what they found is that the number one predictor of both our long-term health and our happiness is social connection. So above how much money we have, above where we live, above our race, our gender, our education level, or any of those things, the number one predictor is social connection. We as humans
What's
are
the
hardwired.
study again? Because I want to make sure I get it.
Yes. So it's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development.
Harvard
And
Study of Adult Development. Okay, got it.
if you're a TEDx or a TED Talk watcher, Robert Waldinger, he is the lead on the study right now, has a great TEDx talk about some of the findings from the study. It's awesome. He talks about this idea of connection. And to me, that is so profound, because what it does is it brings the conversation just outside of me, I, ego, right? And it broadens it. And it also recognizes that we don't live in these little bubbles, right? We are creatures that affect each other. And that's a really important piece too. And I often say, like, people ask me, like, how do I get out of a bad mood? One of the things I'll say is that one of the best ways is to put yourself in the service of others.
Right.
Because as soon as you do that, you're out of me, I'm in my bad mood, into helping someone else. And not only do you get a boost in your happiness, when you do something nice for somebody else, they get a boost as well. And not only that, one of my favorite research studies was done in a coffee shop. And it was actually study was done before COVID. And so how it's like trendy to buy coffee for the people in line, like behind you?
Of course.
So in this study, researchers studied people where a stranger bought a coffee for the stranger behind them in line.
Okay.
And what they found was that the person that bought the coffee, they saw an increase in their happiness, right? Not surprising. You did something nice. And these don't need to be big things, by the way, right? Buying a coffee, carrying someone's groceries, shoveling a driveway, whatever it is. And so that person, the person that bought the coffee, had an increase in their happiness.
Okay.
The person that had the coffee bought for them, not surprisingly, they also saw an increase in their happiness because a stranger did something nice for them, right? That feels good. And the researchers also studied everybody else in the coffee shop.
Observers.
And anyone who saw that activity happen also saw a boost in their happiness.
It's so cool. It's that 3 degree of separation kind of thought, right?
Exactly. And it shows us that our actions go beyond just us, right? And we are all connected. And what we do and how we show up, it's not this little isolated thing in a bubble, right? It really does go beyond us. I think that's something to report. That's important to remember.
Have you ever seen a percentage given to that? The third person, the one who just observed the happiness, like how much of happiness?
I haven't, but what I have read, I was actually reading recently, because you know how we're all doing all these Zoom things all the time now, right? I was wondering, like, how much of our connection is actually still established on virtual versus in person?
So what'd you find out?
I read a study, I think last week, and it was about 80%.
Okay.
So still quite effective, right? Still, especially when we can't physically be together, reminding ourselves that we don't have to physically be close in order to feel close. And we can actually maintain a pretty good level of connection from a virtual experience. And then when you start to factor in things like, beforehand, if say you and I wanted to podcast and we had none of this, I would have to fly to you or you would have to fly here. So then we have all of that time. We've got the stress of the airports. We've got all of these things, right? So there's the immediate, but then there's also like the travel that we don't have to do if the weather's bad to see our friend. Like, so there's a lot of context to it, but knowing that it is something that is really, we are able to get a lot of connection to virtually too. I think that's good to know, especially in this world where we're living in the virtual world a lot, right?
Well, I love the connection. Let's keep going deeper on that. But I just had a quick thought. Okay, so if it's 80% currently, and I guess, that would vary on what type of Zoom interaction and all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we get it to 100%, or how do you get it beyond that? Have you any thoughts on that?
So these are my thoughts. It wasn't in the study that I read, but I think that we have to remind ourselves that connection goes beyond the moment too. It's like, do you ever, like, I was out for a walk the other day and I passed this yoga studio where a friend of mine and I used to go, and I took a picture and I sent it to her. I didn't say anything. I sent a photo of the yoga studio, and I didn't even get a response back. And I felt a connection to her because I went back to that place where we used to go there together.
Oh, you've been there.
Like a memory.
Yes.
And when we recall memories, that can enhance connection as well, for good or bad. But also, we have a recall bias where we are more likely as time goes by to remember the good things as opposed to the bad.
Oh, now
that's kind of interesting.
That is so cool, because I've been taught, or I've read, I'm not sure, it's not accurate. That's why I love getting your research, that it's the opposite. We have a negativity bias, right? This idea. Yeah. So tell me what you're talking about, because this is cool. What is it?
So you were absolutely right. We have a negativity bias, and a negativity bias is our brains natural, innate, inborn. This is something we are born with. It evolved from a good place because back in the day, we had to watch out for lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, right? Because everything was coming
Hey,
at
I
us. But
still
now,
do. I didn't tell you this. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho. Okay. And like I'm looking out my windows right now, it's actually snowing. But we have wolves and we have moose and we have elk that come down the hill. In fact, sometimes I'll walk right across there. And it's so beautiful. The idea is actually that, I'm not threatened, right? But my doggy is, right? So Ruby. So whenever I take her out, especially late at night if she has to go potty, I got to go out there with her. And it was -1 degrees this morning, right? And so I'm going out there and I'm just making sure there's no wolves, there's no coyotes that can attack her. But normally you're right. Let's go back to that's not the norm, right? Okay.
Not the norm, right? And I love that. Does Ruby like to try to herd the animals from her ridgeback?
No, she's actually, and you had a Rhodesian ridgeback.
Yeah.
Right. She's actually very loving and very, very shy. And so she'll watch the animals. She doesn't want to chase them. And most dogs will chase them, right?
Yeah.
The prey drive, right? She doesn't have that, which is really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. And she'll look back at me like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, we're cool. And we just sit, and just watch. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So she's not, demonstrating this negativity bias, right? She's, so it's also like if we receive 10 compliments in a day, right? And one person says one bad thing,
okay.
At the end of the night, we put our head on the pillow and we go to sleep. Like, what's our one thought? It's the bad thing, even though we had all these good. That's an example of the negativity bias, which is our brain's proclivity to focus on the bad, to focus on the threats. And so part of the work now is really overriding the brain's negativity bias. It's recognizing that our brain is looking for the bad. It's on the lookout for danger, for things that are wrong. And so part of happiness is retraining our brain to look for the good. Because I almost think like life sometimes is like a Where's Waldo. You remember Where's Waldo, like the book? You'd open this book and there's this little guy and there would be a scene with like all sorts of people and all sorts of things going on. And you'd have to try to find Waldo on this page.
Yes.
And it was never easy to do because there's just too much going on. And this is what our world is like. There's so much to focus on. And so we really have to rewire our brain, change the lens that we're seeing things from the natural, normal proclivity for bad into looking for the good. And so sometimes I often say, like, we don't actually have to seek SEEK happiness. Mm-hmm. Part of happiness is about seeing seeing happiness, right? Looking around and noticing what we already have that is good. And so just like any sort of habit, at first, when we start to sort of look for the good, it's harder, right? The beginning of any behavior change is harder. But what we know in terms of the science of habit formation is that over time, it gets easier. Mm-hmm. And so I'll touch on a second in a really powerful way that we can do that. But just to sort of circle back to what I was saying before. So in the moment right now, our brain naturally wants to focus on the negative, right? Until we override that. But then when we add a temporal element, we add time, what happens is our brain does funny things to us where we think that we see the world exactly perfect, but we don't. And so over time, we tend to actually remember better memories and the verses. So it's like, when you have a really bad holiday and then like someone burns the turkey and like this and that happened, over time, you're less likely to remember those things. So it's kind of that good piece for the most part. And that's like, considering not like major traumatic events or something like that. We're just sort of talking about day-to-day life in this example. But basically, when we override our brain's negativity bias, what we're doing is we're changing the lens that we see the world. And we are starting to really become a conscious creator of the reality that we are in, as opposed to having it passively happen to us. And I think that that's powerful in and of itself. And one of the best ways that we can do that, and you touched on this earlier, is gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most profound ways that we can start to override that brain's negativity bias. Because what is practicing gratitude? It's looking for things in our life that we're grateful for, that we're thankful for, that we appreciate. We're looking for the good. And I also love gratitude because it doesn't take a lot of time, like maybe 1 to 2 minutes a day. It doesn't cost anything and it can be done anywhere. Right. And in like a good, better, best situation, thinking about things that we're grateful for is good. Writing them down, whether that be electronically or with onto paper, increases the impact of the gratitude practice. And I've actually recently started to take my gratitude practice even one step further, because so all the research that I read, I try things, right? In my life, I try all these things in research to see, right? Like I'm a student of my body. And so I was practicing gratitude, and I would write down, like people, or what someone said to me, or something I learned, or people that I talked to, and I would write it in my gratitude journal. And then one day I thought, hold on a second, nobody knows that they're in my gratitude journal, So now sometimes I actually like to take my gratitude practice a step further, and I'll actually thank somebody, send a text, leave a voice note, make a call, and share that gratitude. Because not only then am I creating that connection, I'm also expressing appreciation, but I'm also modeling that behavior for somebody else that may be able to sort of think about gratitude in their life too.
I love that. And I try to do that every morning. I do my glad to be here wake up. And by the way, we're creating this gratitude package of how to make gratitude part of your day, right? And it's a wake up, and it's just review. First off, though, what am I grateful for in the present moment? So presently, right? Then I review the past, and then I go forward. And I found that sharing that is even way more powerful, but I didn't know it until you just said it. Right. Yeah. And I've also seen on workshops, and try this, I'd like to know how you do that on workshops, is when you get people, I call it my glad to be here share out. So after we've talked for a little bit, I say, well, what are you grateful for? And like you said, you could just have them think about it. You could have them write it down. But when we share it, when they actually say it in loud, whether it's on Zoom or in live, it's amazing when you watch the other people's faces, right? And I've also noticed it opens up. It makes it a safe environment where people can start sharing personal stuff, that they may or may not want to share in a work environment, but they do. They feel safe, right? So that's a technique I've been using. What do you use? Do you have a technique you use, let's say in a workshop?
So sometimes I'll ask people, okay, what are you grateful for? And then they'll give whatever answers. And then we'll sort of unpack, how do we increase the impact of the gratitude? And so we'll talk about in making it a full sensory experience, right? So instead of saying, I'm grateful for the time that I spent with my sister yesterday. Right. Then, okay, if we were baking cookies, let's say, then I would imagine the time that we were baking cookies, but then I would incorporate how the cookies smelled when they were in the oven. I would almost like go back into that moment and almost like imagine I was smelling the cookies when they're like, when they're like warm out of the oven and they're like gooey. Imagine like eating them like that. How does it taste? What's the texture like in my mouth? When we involve more of our senses in that experience, it helps to really enrich the impact of it. And then the other thing, I loved how you were saying about like going around. A lot of times, because of my background in childhood obesity and with kids and families, I'll have a lot of parents ask me, how do I help my children to learn gratitude?
Right.
And so one of the activities that is really great that I encourage for families or for anyone is to make a gratitude jar. So you just take like an empty mason jar or any jar or box. Sometimes with kids, they like to decorate it like an art project. And then every day, say whatever family meal you eat together, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or maybe it's part of, your after school routine, whatever sort of something that happens on a regular basis in terms of the family habits in your life, you go around and write down something you're grateful for and talk about it, and you put it in the jar. And so over time, this jar grows, and it's a collective of things, the gratitudes for the family. And so not only is it great because we know from research that when you establish healthy habits with children in childhood, it's this window of opportunity where they're more likely to continue those behaviors into adulthood. So by starting young.
What age? You were just getting at it. Do you have an age time frame?
They need to be old enough to have the cognition to understand what's going on. So 7, 8, 9-ish, depending on the child, where they can actually sort of understand what gratitude actually is and have that sort of level of awareness for themselves. But even if they're younger, even if they don't realize it, starting to pattern that behavior is always a great thing, because what you're doing is you're teaching children from a young age to think about good things in their life. And if they don't know what gratitude means, especially if they're younger, then it's like, what makes you smile? What makes you happy? What makes your heart feel warm? However you want to phrase the question, but you're helping the children to look for the good. And then by writing them down and putting them in the jar, what happens is when your child or your niece or your nephew, or, even if you're adults, your partner is having a bad day, it can be a great exercise to go and actually take out some of those gratitudes and remind yourself, because especially when you're in the thick of it, sometimes we need that one thing to stop that spiral, right? To shift our thinking, to give us a new perspective. And we can actually use some of these gratitudes to actually help us to do that.
Man, I love where you're going. I want to share with you 4 steps that my team and I came up with as part of our gratitude packet, and get your opinion on that.
Yeah.
But before I share those steps, my mom, you talked about how do you pattern, and happiness and gratitude as a young child. I remember my mom just was, happy. It was the way she lived her life, and that was from an observing standpoint, right? And I thought, again, I've heard a very wise teacher say, if you want to teach something, that's you got to live it first, right? You have to be that example, be the change you want to see in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And what I was thinking about, though, so we all get stuck in something throws us off balance. So let me run these 4 steps by you and tell me what you think on that, right? So I call it my glad to be here reboot, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going through the day, and all of a sudden, bam, something hits me, and I start into that negative spiral, right? Because we all know how that can get going pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed first off that usually what happens is that you're knocked off balance. It's like you don't get angry right away, right? The first thing is like, wait a minute, someone just said something, and you kind of go, wait a minute, and then you start thinking about it more, and you go, well, that's starting to get me upset, actually frustrated. I don't agree with that. And then the next thing you know, you're actually angry, and finally resentment, right? But so I want to stop that spiral. Mm-hmm. And here's the four steps. First one is just stop. Right. So you have to become aware. And that's why maybe I'm thinking awareness might be the better word. Is first, just become aware that I'm in that loop. Right. And after you consciously, and this is why I like meditation, because it teaches us to be aware of moments. The next step is to actually breathe, right? So get into your breath, get out of your mind, right? Mm. And into your body. And I like to use the breath because it's always there. And just take 3 deep breaths, make sure the exhale is longer than the inhale. And it does start to calm you down. I think, physically we know that too, biomarkers and all that. But, then, look up and get into your senses, right? Like you were saying. So, if you're outside, hey, wow, look at the sky, that's beautiful. Or if I'm inside, I'm sitting on a chair. Well, I feel the weight of the chair, what's the temperature like? So I'm trying to get myself out of my mind, which is going to take me back into why'd they say that? What about this? And then the last one is glad to be here, which is just, say glad to be here, be present in the moment, that there's something to be grateful for. 4 steps. What do you think?
I love it, because often, especially when we get in those spirals, we need a pattern interrupt. Okay. And like you said, it's like in those times, it's the hardest to actually interrupt the pattern. So when you just have some steps you have to follow, it takes away the like having to figure out what to do. It's like, it's there. It's in your back pocket. You can just pick it up and follow the steps.
Like a checklist.
Exactly. And that's why like it's great, because we don't have to spend time thinking about what to do. We have this method. And I love what you said about getting into your body, getting into your breath, because so often we get so, and I'm very guilty of this. I get so in my head. Yeah. Right. And we live in our head, and our head can be a very scary, messy, chaotic place. And then when we can ground that into the breath, it changes things, because we get a different perspective. We can actually pause. I think sometimes, especially when we start to spiral more, and we need something to stop that. And the breath, I love that.
What other techniques do you have to help people when we're in, and by the way, what did you use? We talked about the negativity bias, mm-hmm. But you called something else over time. It's called what? Something else where we start to remember the good things, right? I mean,
temporal recall bias. That's the science, but basically we tend to remember good memories more. So that's a good thing to remind ourselves too. Sometimes even when you're in the thick of it, in the mud of it, be like, what? Sometimes I'll give myself context of like, you're not going to remember how bad it is. But at the same time, what's interesting. So if I was to ask you right now, Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? No judgment. It's just awareness. What do you think for you?
I went 9, and then my mind went to 8 for some reason. But
Okay.
okay, so
Perfect. So, whatever it is, and we have good days and bad days. There's no judgment. It's just awareness, right? So
actually, I'll give it's 9 because we're having this conversation. This is really a moment of like, wow, this is cool. I mean, there's actually for the conversation standpoint, I would actually put it on a 10. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now. But then my mind's going, well, holy cow, you got to remember that, and I start to get into, well, what am I going to do with it, right? But anyhow, right now in the moment, I'm going to move it to 10, but go ahead.
perfect. So now say I was to take one of, because people always ask me, like, how do I measure happiness, right? We have these validated tools we use in research. Like, for example, there's one called the Oxford Happiness Inventory that was created at Oxford, or the Subjective Happiness Scale that was created by Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky that I talked about with her definition earlier. So we have tools validated in the research, right? We've got some good validity. So if I was to take one of my tools and administer it to you and then score it, and I get a number, say it's like 7.2, that doesn't mean anything to you or to me necessarily, right? But if I was to compare the number that I got on a tool with the number that you just gave me, what we know from research is that they would be pretty close. So what we know from research is that as humans, we are pretty good at self-reporting our own happiness. So we're pretty good at answering and pretty accurate at answering how happy we are. We know that. At the same time, like often when I'm doing talks, so I'll ask whoever's in my audience or virtually that question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And then I'll ask a second question. So I'll say, okay, say you won $10,000 in the lottery today. And I asked you to take that 10K and spend it in a way to maximize your happiness. So spend it in a way that's going to bring you the most amount of happiness. Would you A, go out and buy a new wardrobe or do a home renovation? B, go on a trip when you feel safe to travel again? C, if you budgeted about $200 a week a year for self-care. So whether that be like getting a massage, ordering dinner, buying flowers, going to a movie, whatever it is, something that you like. Or D, donating all the money to charity, right? Which of those 4 do you think would maximize your happiness?
Oh, well, for sure. The last one I know is the long-term, much more beneficial one, but it's not where my mind normally goes, right? So, I mean, just to be, transparent, I mean, like the third one sounded pretty good because I got a massage last night, right? And so self-care, I always, back to the kind of the comment of if you take care of yourself, you'll be able to take care of others better too. But it's interesting. I think I've seen some of this research that reality is it's donating, right? Making a difference in someone else's life. But tell me, what did the research really show?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I asked this question to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people. I never get one clear answer. Never. It's always across the board. And the reason is, yes, donating money makes us happy. Yes, going on a trip makes us happy. They all do. But what we know from research is that we're pretty good at self-reporting our happiness, like I talked about. But what we're not as good at is figuring out what it is that makes us happy. So as humans, we have this sort of bias where we think it's the big shiny moments. We think it's the birthdays, the graduations, the trips, the donating your money that day bring us the most amount of happiness. But what we know from research is that if we want to live a happy life, the best way to do that is to create small bursts of joy throughout the day.
Oh, that's
nice. What cumulatively adds up to a happier life. So if you were to take that 10K and every week you get a burst or something that's adds up to more happiness throughout the year. And I also love this concept because sometimes our brain plays tricks on us, right? Like our biases, we don't realize what we don't like recall from the past, like I was talking about, but also if we think it's the big shiny moments that make us happy, what we're sort of misinterpreting reality. We're misconstruing what is actually going on. And so the idea of how do I create more small bursts of joy throughout my day is much more manageable. It also brings happiness into something that we can do today, not something that will happen if X, Y, and Z in the future. It's not this mirage that we're chasing. It makes it available to us today, because what happens is when we have a small burst of joy, when we spend some time cuddling with our pets, taking them for a walk, when we call our friend, not only do we feel good in the moment, but it starts to create, we talked about spirals going down. We can also have what we call in research upward spirals of positive emotion.
Nice.
So when something good happens, it's like, have you ever walked down the street and a stranger smiled at you?
Yeah, sure.
What do? You tend to smile back. Or if someone does something nice, then maybe the tone of your next email is a little bit nicer, right? So we can actually have the spirals go both ways. And so when we think about how do I live a happy life? How do I create more happiness in my life? It's really asking, where can I create more opportunities throughout my day to do or to create these small bursts of joy? And I use the word small in terms of time or effort, not in terms of impact. It's actually a very large impact in how we feel.
Wow. Let's dive deeper. But as you were talking, I went with I'm an and guy, right? So you kind of tricked me. Okay, 4 choices, which one? And now I go, wait a minute. They all were. It's an and, right? I mean, in different ways. But I really like the small burst mentality, right? And I've done a lot of thoughtfulness on giving, right? And one of the things that I do is I give 10% of all my fees to charity, and that's something I started 15 years ago. And whenever a client hires us, we give 10%. Started the Glad Beer Foundation, and we let the clients pick where half of that goes. So it starts this upward spiral, right? Because everybody wants to, they're doing such great work out there. But you just made me rethink about, it's not that one-time donation, right? It's this small thing, and also to be unattached to the gift, the giver, and yourself. So it's not about me. It's not even about the gift of whatever it is, money or food or whatever. And it's not even about the participant. When you can actually take all 3 of those and realize it's just helping others. I don't know. Yeah. What's the research behind that? The giving, how to give better is, I guess, the question.
Yeah. I actually did a webinar for the holidays, how to actually have a happy holiday, because it's like you say all the time, have a happy holiday. And you're like, what does that mean? And how do I do that? We're not taught. So I was actually I did some research. I went deep into the gift giving literature to see okay, how do we maximize it? So a couple of things. One, when we're buying a gift for somebody, we're often thinking of their face when they open the gift, right? That moment.
Yeah.
And yet that's one moment when they receive the gift, but how does that gift get used in their life? There's a lot more there. So it's often sometimes we think that we know what people want better than what they say. And so what we know from the research is, no, what they tell you they want. So listen to it. And also remind ourselves when we're thinking of gifts, it's not just what's the look on their face. It's like, say you buy some shoes that are really, really cute, but they're super uncomfortable. They love them in the moment, but then they're not that practical, right? Because they hurt their feet, doesn't bring them as much joy. But I also, what you said about surrendering the attachment, because a lot of times when we give a gift, we're doing it because we're hoping
expectation
to have a certain feeling, or right. And we can't control people, right? We can't control what they do, what they think, any of that kind of stuff. So if our giving outcome is contingent on a response or a lack of response to the gift, then we're taking away some of that joy. But we also, the other side of this is, for me, I have a hard time receiving gifts because when somebody does something nice for me, I immediately want to be like, oh, well, let me do something nice for you, right? Like I feel really have to coach myself through, I love to do nice things for other people. And that gives me happiness to do something for someone. I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm doing it because I care. So I have to remind myself, if somebody does that for me, by me sort of deflecting or, trying to flip it back immediately, I'm taking away their joy of giving the gift, right? By being grateful, then what I'm doing is I'm not only accepting the gift, but I'm also giving them the greatest gift back that I can, which is appreciation for what they did without having to kind of flip that narrative. And that's something for me that I've had to work on, because I want to give, but I find it very hard to receive, and giving goes both ways. And it's a practice for all of us.
Wow. Yeah. So true. The couple of thoughts here. I want to keep going because this is so much fun, and we're learning so much. Let's go back to perceptions, because we talked earlier about, the idea of the perception, was the world coming from us or at us? And what was the earlier quote? I already forgot it. I got to remember it.
We don't see things as we are. We see them as they are.
Yeah. So I like, we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are, right? Yeah. So this gives us, reason to work on ourselves, right? So I don't know if there's any research behind this. This is why I'm asking you, maybe, in your vast knowledge of research, have you seen anything like this? I have been told or observed, or maybe just I don't know, this idea of where perceptions come from in the brain, right? And that when we are in a state of gratitude, okay, when your mind is in that state of gratitude, that it actually lights up the area of the brain where perceptions come from. So you have, more awareness of the perceptions. And then I also heard, tell me if this is accurate in any ways, that when we are in a generous state of mind, so when we're giving, right, that actually lights up the area of our brain where self-esteem or confidence comes from. And so what I've done is I've kind of built the link. I said, well, then that's a good reason to be grateful and generous at the same time, because you'll see things others don't see, right? And have the confidence to take the action. And I'm thinking about innovation. I'm thinking about creativity. I'm thinking about just your life changing. So have you seen research on this? I mean, what do you see?
Yeah, our brain is a fascinating organ. And another one sort of along those lines too, is that what we see is that the areas in our brain, if you look at an MRI, right, when you can see sort of areas that are red and orange and yellow show more activity, what we see is that exercise is another one that plays into this. So the areas of our brain that light up when we move our body are a lot of those areas where happiness lives too. And so this is something that I think is really cool. And it doesn't need to be like really vigorous exercise. We're talking like walking. And I think that, one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky, she says that exercise is one of the most effective instant mood boosters. And what we know from research is that on days that people exercise, their mood is improved compared to days that they don't. And not only that, but the residue. So the lasting impact of exercise can last 6 to 8 hours. So in the moment we move our body, when, we want to, sometimes I'll like put on a song if I don't have a lot of time in between calls and dance around with my puppy for a little bit, or jump on my rebound or something like that. Right. But moving our body, especially throughout the day, it impacts how we show up. Right. And it's like sort of, Tony Robbins always says emotion is created by motion. And I think he's onto something there, because that can really get things moving too. And like you talked about, this idea of creativity, generosity, all of those things, just like how we talked about at the beginning, how our physical health is not separate from our mental health, right? A lot of these emotions and feelings and all of that are all related too. And I think that that's really cool and exciting, because what that does is it gives us an opportunity to really lean in to some of those things and to see benefits in other areas of our life. And when we're looking at, how what's the lens that I'm seeing things through, and how am I feeling, knowing that, when I'm grateful, I'm more likely to see things, the good. I'm naturally more likely to look for the good. I think that is really cool, because what happens over time is we start to shift the lens that we see the world. I mean, naturally, like I noticed for myself when I first started practicing gratitude, if I started to pay attention to the conversations I was having over time, I would start saying things like, I'm so grateful that I got out for a walk today, and like vocabulary that I didn't used to use before, or things I maybe wouldn't have said. When we start to focus on the things that we're grateful for, we start to notice more of those things. It's like, that effect where, like, say you buy a car, right? And then everyone on the road has your car, same color, everything, right? We start to notice those things over time. It's really cool to see how our brain can sometimes, right, it can lead us down a rabbit hole when we have this negativity bias, but at the same time, when we have the awareness to change the behavior, we can change the narrative, and we can change the lens that we see the world, and then we can actually change our experience of the world. Same world, two separate experiences.
Oh, brilliant. You had 4 really great steps there. The awareness, behavior, your experience, and then you change the world. Did I get them right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, it was brilliant. We're going to mark it,
I love it.
Yeah. 11:47 Mountain Time, man. You came up with something great. I love that. And that's what changes the world, right? And it starts with awareness, right? And our perceptions. Wow. Hey, what would be some of the really, if you were to, for myself or anybody else who wants to dive into happiness research, right? What are some of the most effective ones that you've found? Where would you send us?
So there's actually, I talked about how we were never taught how to be happy.
Right.
Dr. Laurie Santos, she's a professor at Yale, has her entire course on happiness, which is one of the most popular courses, available online for free. The Greater Good Science Center which is at UC Berkeley.
Berkeley, yeah.
Berkeley. They were very influential in my PhD work. Amazing stuff going on there. They have a wonderful newsletter where they publish sort of in a blog style some of the most current research coming out. It's very accessible. They've got great tools, great videos. In terms of books, I mentioned Sonia Lyubomirsky's book, the How of Happiness. Sean Aker has one called The Happiness Advantage. He also has a great TEDx talk on the topic. What I think, there's so many great podcasts now. There's the one that Berkeley does called The Science of Happiness. Laurie Santos has one called The Happiness Lab. There's so much, and I love it because what is really interesting, and when I sort of do my talks, if I have my slides, I have this graph, and basically up until about 1980, there was no published peer-reviewed academic literature on happiness.
Really?
So up until the 1980s, we never thought, what's going right and how do we learn more? We focused on what's wrong and how do we fix it?
Yeah.
When you notice this graph, what you see is this very large increase in the slope of this line, almost an exponential curve up, because we now are really appreciating both sides of it. And the work that is being done in this field is just expanding and growing day by day. And it is so exciting to me to be able to show up at the table with data as to why happiness is such an important feature in our life. But at the same time, it is not a panacea, right? This is something that I noticed this weird thing that happened to me. So in July, I broke up with my boyfriend of 4 years. So very sad, right? Difficult time. Breakups are not fun. And I would tell people, like my friends would say, how are you feeling? And I would say, I'm sad. I'm heartbroken. I don't feel good today. And they would say to me, well, you're a happiness researcher, Gillian. You're supposed to be happy. And I started this is what was like patterns, right? I talked about pattern recognition. I'm like, why do all these people think I'm supposed to be happy during a breakup? I don't understand. But the perception that was projected onto me was that because I study happiness, I'm happy all the time.
Oh.
And I was confused because when you get into the literature, and to be fully honest, when I first started studying happiness from a personal perspective, one of the reasons I wanted to study happiness was to figure out how to be happy. I didn't like the challenging emotions, right? I don't like feeling anxious. I don't like feeling depressed. I don't like feeling sad. So why don't I figure out, I'm a researcher. How do I figure out how to get rid of those and just be happy all the time? This is my goal. When I got into the literature, I quickly learned that, nope, that is not the goal. It's impossible to be happy all the time. In fact, there's actually research, which is sometimes in literature referred to as like the dark side of happiness, where people who set their goal as to be happy all of the time are paradoxically less happy than other people. And at first, when I read that, I was like, hold on a second. Why is that? That doesn't make sense. If your goal is to be happy all the time, you'd think you'd be happier than most people. But when you unpack it, what happens is it's impossible to be happy all of the time. It is impossible. So if you've set for yourself an impossible goal, what's going to happen? You're not going to reach your goal. And what happens when we don't reach goals, right? We feel down on ourselves. We feel discouraged. We feel like we're doing something wrong. We get hard on ourselves. So yes, we need to prioritize positivity, but recognizing that happy all the time is not the goal. I'm a happiness researcher. I am not happy all the time, but nor do I wish to be, nor would I wish that for you or for you listening or for my friends or my family, because part of happiness is understanding that it is a part of the full spectrum of human emotion. And part of living a full life is really embracing all of those. So, to know, and to give yourself the grace that if you're having a day where you're not feeling happy, knowing that you don't have to be happy all the time, it gives you that permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And then what happens is over time, when you start to do things to build your happiness muscles, sort of how I think about it, right? You practice gratitude, you do nice things for other people, you focus on connections, you give, whatever these things are, you grow your happiness muscle. But it doesn't mean that you get rid of all of the challenging emotions. What happens is that your highs get higher, but your lows get higher. You don't get rid of them, but you just become more resilient. And then the question becomes not marinating in those emotions for an extended period of time, because part of rethinking happiness, I think about happiness the same way that I think about fitness or nutrition, right? You would never walk in the gym or do a home workout and have the best workout of your life and text me and be like, oh my goodness, Gillian, I reached fitness. I had the best workout of my life. I've reached fitness, right? We don't do that. We understand that if we want to be fit and healthy people, what do we have to do? We have to move our body on a regular basis. Same as nutrition, right? If we want to be fit and healthy, we have to eat healthy food most of the time. It doesn't mean that we can't have some of those things once in a while. just like with happiness, right? We don't reach happiness. It's a practice. It's something that we have to work at. So when we change the lens of how we view happiness, and instead of seeing it as a destination, see it the same way as nutrition or as physical activity. And then over time, when we start to grow that muscle, we welcome the full range of human emotions, the full spectrum, because that's what really creates the human experience. And it isn't about getting rid of those challenging things. It's about welcoming them, feeling them, growing through them. That's how resilience is born, which often pushes us to character limits or to things that we never thought we were possible to do. And yeah, that's the full range of human emotions, the full spectrum. Spange, I just made up a new word, spectrum and range.
I'm so glad you brought that in, because even not just with happiness, but when people, see, let's say someone successful or doing, good things, they don't always see all the struggles that came with that, right? And we all have those struggles and overcoming. And thanks for being so open and honest about, your breakup. And I think we learn from those, right? I mean, that's the key, right? Can we learn from them and grow as a human? But what I really like what you said, and I just want to stamp it, is that yes, practicing happiness, practicing gratitude, your highs get higher, but your lows get higher. That to me is cool, right? Because you're in this sine wave. And to me, and you mentioned this word, and I thought maybe we could dive into it, is resilience, right? Let's talk about resiliency now. Did you do a course on resiliency, or let's talk about it?
Yeah. So my course is called Happy and Resilient. And I actually did it with a good friend of mine who's a resilience researcher, and I'm a happiness researcher. So we did it together.
Great.
And so resilience is basically our ability to bounce back. Hard things happen. That's life, right? So when those things happen, resilience comes in and they ask, how do I respond to this difficult thing? Whether it be a job loss, a health issue, a divorce, a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Life is not just this like smooth sailing thing. It's just not. And part of the harsh truth and reality of life is that sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes difficult things do. So when we can accept that, because a lot of people just want to push those things away and pretend like it's not happening, right? But in terms of healthy psychological functioning, no, okay, we accept that life is not easy all the time. And when hard things happen, how do I respond? Now, resilience is our ability to bounce back. But for a lot of people, and I am guessing if you are listening or watching us right now, you're not one of those people that just wants to bounce back to where you were before. You want to grow beyond it. And so that's where we see flourishing, right? That's where hard things happen to me. I respond, I take time, and not to pretend like everything's okay. You go through it, you grow through it. But then it's not just how am I going to bounce back? It's how high am I going to bounce back, right? And so that's where oftentimes some of the really hard, difficult things we would never wish upon ourselves, right? I didn't want to go through a breakup, yet that's what happened. And I have shown myself, and I've been forced to prove to myself how independent I can be, how strong I can be, how I can function on my own, how I can, feel sad and allow myself to feel sad, all of these things, but it's really helped me grow as a person. And so this is where I think that, especially during difficult or stressful times, one, I think that sometimes we want to like attribute meaning to something when we're going through it, as opposed to just going through it. And I think that part of the process is being in the process, just like the process of happiness, where we're not just like, oh, okay, I'm going to be here, so let's just fast forward. It's about going through that stuff. And it teaches us a lot. And the self-awareness that comes from that, I wouldn't take it back because of who I am now, right? And we often have those difficult, those challenging times, not that we invite them, but at the same time, I do think that when we're uncomfortable, when we're forced into difficult things, how we respond, it's like Wayne Dyer used to always say, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? And then I would say orange juice, right? And he would say apple juice doesn't come out. Under pressure, what's inside comes out. And so it gives us this opportunity to see, how is our character? What are we doing? Am I going and numbing myself? Don't get me wrong. I had like a couple nights where I'd cry on the couch and whatever, but I wasn't doing that forever, right? I started creating a new exercise habit. I actually, the time we worked out, I got a puppy. So all of these things, but it's like, how do we respond when things are difficult? What is inside of us, our character under pressure? How is that coming? And do I like what I see? Do I want to do more of that? Are there things maybe that I want to tweak about myself? I don't know. But until we're under that pressure, we don't have the opportunity to see those things.
Well, and it's so beautiful. You used your own life as example, but we've all been through a lot of pressure with COVID and all
yes.
Right. And so, how do you respond? And I'm glad you used the word respond. I did a short little impact video. I send these out all the time, is to respond, vice react. Right. And what I've learned, and I learned this flying, that when you hit turbulence in the air, if you're going through turbulence as a formation, if you're by yourself, the airplane moves up and down. And if it goes up, your response is to push the stick forward. If it goes down, you pull back. But in formation, you can't do that because you would hit somebody, right? So we have to learn to respond and not react, right? And the response is usually to dampen your reaction, right? You do not do what you would naturally do. You have to think about it and respond. So how does that connect?
I love that. I love that analogy. And it makes sense because so often though, if we take a second and we pause, often our reaction is a reflexive reaction, or we're acting out of emotion as opposed to our true feeling. It's kind of like, I'm going to paraphrase this quote, but one of my favorite quotes comes from Dr. Viktor Frankl. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is a beautiful book. But one of the quotes in it, he says, in between stimulus and response, there's a pause. And in that pause lies our power to choose. And in our choice lies our growth and our freedom, something like that. But basically it's like, there's stimulus, there's response, but in between there's that pause. And that's where we get to choose, as opposed to reflexively having something happen, right? And that's where wisdom comes in. That's where restraint and self-control come in. That's where deliberate action as opposed to passive response comes into play. And that's a very powerful place to be when we are able to recognize that emotions are data. Like, this is the thing. This is what I realized. Like, emotions aren't inherently good or bad, right? They're not necessarily positive or negative. Anxiety could be bad, but also if I'm procrastinating doing something, I might have anxiety because I'm procrastinating doing something that I said I was going to do and I'm out of integrity. So if I'm feeling anxiety right now, it's not negative. It's actually a positive thing because it's reminding me where I'm out of integrity, or where I'm out of alignment, or where I'm out of the person that I want to be. So when we see that emotions are data, they're signposts pointing us in where we go, then we can recognize, am I responding because I've evaluated that data and I'm choosing my outcome? Or am I allowing that to just happen and it's a reflex? And I think that that's such a powerful position. When in doubt, like you talked about breath earlier, sometimes if I don't know, even just taking a second and like taking a breath. Someone asked me a hard question. I'm like, I don't know the answer. I just take a second, take a breath, and it's almost like a little reset. But then what I love about it is it gives us our power back because we are choosing our response as opposed to having our response just come through us. And that is something. So in research, we have a term called autonomy. And autonomy is basically just like our thoughts are chosen and self-endorsed. So it's about controlling what we can. It's not to say that we control everything in the world, because we can't, right? But there are areas in our life where we do have control. And when we talked about focus, right? When we choose to focus on those areas where we do have control, autonomy is more of a predictor of our happiness than how much money we have, how good looking we are, how popular we are, or how good our sex life is. So I think we can agree that those 4 things contribute to happiness, but above all of those is autonomy. It's asking, where do I have control? And I want to give more of my focus and my energy and my effort and my resources there. And that's a very powerful place to be, because then we are in control of our response, which is exactly what you were saying, because we are choosing our response. It's not a reflexive thing.
And what does autonomy mean?
It means that our activities, our thoughts, and our behaviors are self-chosen and self-endorsed. It means that I'm deciding what I want to focus on. I'm deciding what I want to think about. I'm deciding how I want to act, as opposed to, like, for example, here in Toronto right now, we still have a lot of mandates. Things are still partially closed. We are still wearing masks. There's a lot of restrictions. So if I focused on that, I have no control over what the government is doing in my city right now. And at the same time, do I sit in my condo and stress about going out because of X, Y, and Z that is going to happen, or what I'm missing out on? Or am I focusing on what I do have control over, like playing with my dog? And it's same world, same exact situation, but I'm choosing where to give my focus and my energy and my cognition and my attention, right? Such a precious resource. And when I do that, that has more of an influence on my happiness, because I am choosing to focus on the things that I do have control over. And it's also, at the same time, the caveat to that is it's not about putting on the rose-colored glasses and like pretending like everything's okay. That's the other piece too. I feel like sometimes we just want to like push positivity, right? Sometimes things are bad. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes we are not having a good day. Sometimes sad things happen. So it's about seeing the world for what it is. It's not pretending like everything's okay, bottling up things, pushing things away. It's about welcoming that spectrum, but then also really recognizing where we play a role in how we see things, in the lens that we see the world, like we were talking about before.
You know, that you're in a tension. I call it two sides of the same coin. I'm thinking about this idea of quote reality, right? Okay, that's not reality. You're not seeing things the way it are, versus looking at it and choosing a different view, I guess. So how do you balance that in your life when you have struggles, reality versus autonomy, I guess, what I can do? How do you do that?
It's an ongoing process. It's
Yeah.
a process, not a perfect, right?
Yeah.
But also what I talked about earlier, how like over time, when we do things that make us happier, what we know from research is like we can not only maintain our happiness short term, but we can actually sustain it at higher levels. So essentially our happiness muscle can get stronger. And the byproduct of that is that when something difficult or challenging happens, we can respond in a different way because we've patterned certain behaviors that are already there. It's kind of like, when you're stressed or whatever, and you kind of go into autopilot, right?
Yeah.
And you just do what is already patterned. If what is patterned is to focus on things that you're grateful for, is to do all of those things, that when those things happen, the automatic responses that we have are things that we have developed and this muscle that we have grown. And it's kind of like, someone in the gym has an injury, right? And then they come back, the muscle memory comes back because they've patterned that. We sort of have the same kind of muscle memory with happiness. And so when hard things happen, when we have that muscle imprinted because we've practiced it, we've built the habit of doing things every day that create these small bursts of joy, then that's kind of what comes into play, especially when those difficult things happen. And that becomes our response, as opposed to maybe just having a reflexive response. It's what we've programmed in our mind.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the idea of I just lost my train of thought. You were on it. Oh, the happiness muscle, right? The idea of these patterns, right? Neuroplasticity, right? I've always thought that the brain operates like electricity. It's going to take the path of least resistance.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah. It's so what's interesting, when I do my talk, sometimes I'll put this slide up and I'll have a bunch of words written in different colors. And so it'll say like the word purple, but it'll be in a blue font, and then the word black, yes, and it'll be in a pink font. And so I'll show this slide and I'll ask people to say the colors that you see, don't read the words. And then people will do it, but they struggle, because when we see the word PURPLE, we want to read the word purple. We don't want to see the color of the font that was blue. Our brain our brain is used to seeing letters assembled together and to read them. That's what it's done. That's the path of least resistance of our brain when we see a combination of letters. And yet, if we want to do something different, what do we have to do? We have to give more attention, more focus, more energy, more effort. And over time, it gets easier. So if we were to do this every single day, eventually over time, it gets easier. It's kind of like when we just start to build those new habits. That's how habit formation works. It's always the most difficult at the beginning. And we see this with all sorts of things, with exercise, with even, like, I read this one study where they looked at things like people that had to do 10 sit-ups before they had their morning coffee, something simple like that. Over time, it gets easier because we build the habit. And so this is where I think that comes in too, because when we know that in the beginning is always different, and when we know that our brain takes the path of least resistance, then what we do is, if we want to do something different, we have to do something different, right? Because our brain is going to do what it's always done. And our brain was never taught how to be happy. Our brain, if we want our brain to look at happiness in a different way, what do we have to do? We have to change the lens. We have to put effort. We have to start to see happiness. Instead of seeking it, right? We have to look around and figure out, what do we appreciate? We have to pay attention to it. Happiness doesn't just like this thing that comes to, sometimes maybe if we're lucky, but not all the time. Like, being happy requires work. It requires effort. It requires attention. It requires commitment to a practice for the rest of our life until the day that we die. And so I know that doesn't sound like a sexy Instagram quote, but that's the truth, right? Yeah. It's not like you see happiness as a choice. And I'm like, yeah, like kind of part of, but like, it doesn't sound good to say what I just said, because it doesn't fit nice and neatly on a little quote card, but that's the truth.
Well, I could keep talking forever to you, and we'll have you back. I guarantee you, because
Anytime.
there's so much to learn and grow. But I was thinking about wrapping up in a couple ways. One is you've been able to share some really powerful quotes. That I like that Viktor Frankl one too that you said earlier, right? But are there other kind of quotes or sayings or mantras that you have found that are really powerful for you that you'd like to share?
Yes. So first, I pulled up, I want to give Viktor Frankl the beauty of his words. So I'm going to read you the actual quote.
Please.
So it says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Oh, growth and freedom.
Growth and freedom. It's even better. See, this is why sometimes the words is so important. Now, the other quote, there's two quotes that are really, that I have in my house. Actually, I have three quotes in my house. The first one is a quote that's on my wall in my bedroom. And it's the first quote I see in the morning. And it's from Socrates. And it says, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing.
Beautiful.
And I want to be reminded of that every day, especially as a scientist and as somebody that talks about a subject matter all the time. I have a lot more knowledge on this in this area than a lot of people. And I have I'm learning, but the more you know you don't know, the more you see how expansive this space is. And I never want to stop learning. I always want to be questioning what I know, and I want to be learning and growing. And I never want to be resting on my laurels of certainty or on the knowledge that I already have. I have this hunger and thirst for learning more, and to always be a student is something that is absolutely critical to the essence of my being. So that.
Yes.
The other quote.
Let me just share with you too. I was at Stanford doing my MBA or Sloan Fellow, and I had some extra time, so I was able to study. I went into health, I went into law, I went into yoga. I was studying all these different things. And after year 3, that's what hit me, is I realized the more I knew, the more I realized I didn't know. And it was a freeing experience, because I was like, hey, that's okay, right? I love that you wake up with that humility, right? It's that idea of staying humble and being that student, even the wise teacher. That's so awesome. Okay, what's your next one? I'm on fire.
My next one is from Joseph Campbell, who's a mythologist. Love him. One of his quotes says, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are."
Yeah.
I get truth bumps every time, because one, if you unpack it, the privilege, our life, what we have right now is an absolute privilege. I don't take for granted anything that happens to me, that has happened to me, that has shaped me to be who I am. It's a privilege. And when you recognize it as a privilege, you have a level of reverence and respect and honor for that. It's not just a passive thing. It's not a given. It's a privilege of a lifetime, is being who you are. And this is something that, I've really unpacked. We talk about, we're going to become this person, or I want to be this, or whatever. I really think, just like you said earlier about like in versus out, it's sometimes I think about this idea of, what if we already were perfect when we were born, and what we have to do is remove the layers that have always prevented us from being who we are. Right. I like that. To me,
I think there's a lot of truth to that. You already are perfect. Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing. When you look at babies, right? I mean, come on. Yeah.
That's exactly a lot of what I read, in research, right? I talk about play and laughter, and you watch children, they just do it, right? So there's a lot of wisdom in that, and a remembering of that. And so I love that, because then what it does is it reminds us that life is not to be taken for granted, right? And to really, to be in that space of gratitude and expressing who we are. And when the privilege of lifetime is being who we are, the subtext of that is that we are not somebody else, right? So we are not trying to be someone else, be like somebody else, any of that. We can learn from people. Absolutely. We can be inspired by people, but the privilege of a lifetime is being who we are. And the only person that knows that and can be that is us. And there's a big responsibility there, because then when we are who we are giving our unique gifts to the world, right?
Nice. Okay. You have a third one though.
I do. I read a lot of Stoic philosophy.
Oh,
And so in my bathroom, because I go in there every day, I have memento mori. It basically means remember your death. It's a reminder that you're going to die. And my sister came over and I was explaining this to her, and she's like, that's morbid and weird. That's what she said to me. And I said, not really at all, actually, because reminding us of our death reminds us that we are living right now. And so often you see, and in research, right, people, they get diagnosed with a terminal illness or they have a near-death experience, and it changes how they see the world. I don't need, like, what if I already could remember that now by remembering that I'm going to die? The only certain thing that we have in this world is that we are going to die. And so when we recognize that, then the question becomes, how do I live today?
Yes.
And so to me, nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And when we have that lens, then you show up every single day because you appreciate and you recognize how much of a gift today is, and it makes it so that I'm not wasting, squandering my time or my resources. And so to me, the reminder that I'm going to die is the most empowering thing to help me live.
Wow. There's a beautiful book, and I read a bunch of Stoics, right? Stoicism, and I can't remember the person, but it is about dying. It's the famous guy. I'm going to try to find it. But it talks about that beautiful process, right? And I know I went through, my dad passed away with cancer, and I thought it was the most privileged time to be around him and really see a beautiful way. He taught me not only how to live, he taught me how to die. I mean, how cool is that, right? Yeah, it brings up amazing emotion, right? And it was beautiful. Not it was hard, but it was beautiful at the same time. And there's this practice of waking up in the morning, and I find this hard, but to say, because we don't know, it's uncertain, right? But to say, I'm gonna die today. If you were to believe you were gonna die today, how would that change your day? Who would you call? What would you do? And so it's actually a beautiful practice that I find hard because my mind says, no, you're not going to die, right? And do the mundane things that you have to do, right? But it's beautiful. I don't have to, I choose to. But I love that you remind yourself of that every single day. You said something earlier, and then I want to end on some small burst of gratitude and beauty, right? Is this idea of that not only how do you choose, the Tong Lin. So there's this practice of, it's called Tong Lin, but this practice of taking other people's pain in, right? And empathy, and then, but you take it in and you blow it up, right? So, you use your own white light to blow it up, and bam, that's how you get out of depression, right? How you get out of, to serve others. So I just wanted to restamp that, but let's do a quick small burst of joy, okay?
Sure.
We'll wrap. So what does glad to be here mean to you right now in the present moment?
Glad to be here to me is just like basking in the gratitude of the moment and having appreciation for it and reverence for it. Because like we talked about, here right now in this moment is all we have, right? Everything is us right now. This is it. And so when we can have that awareness, it brings the beauty to this moment because we appreciate it and we recognize it for what it is. And I love the word glad too, because it's not just about being there. It's about being glad to be there. You're happy to be there, no matter where there is, because there isn't always a beautiful place. There can be a hard place. There can be a frustrating place. There can be a sad place. But in all of those places, if we can be glad to be there, then we are glad to be in every moment. And in every moment is where our life is, and it's all we have. And I think it's such a beautiful awareness and a reminder of the gift that we have and the privilege that we have to be here. I love it.
Well, thank you for that. I can see it coming from your heart, right? Not your head. And I try to remind myself every day, glad to be here. And I do that when I step out of bed. I have a little technique. I always step out with my left foot hitting the floor first. And what that reminds me of, the trigger, is that today's not normal. Today is magical. What we've been talking about through this whole time together, right? So I want to thank you. This has been a precious time, Gillian. I want to thank you for your joy, your happiness, your wisdom, and just the way you see the world. You can tell the way you see the world is a beautiful way. So you've definitely graced us with your reverence and your time, and I want to appreciate that. So thank you for this, and let's keep bringing joy and happiness to the world. Glad.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has truly been a privilege to share these moments in this conversation with you, and the work that you're doing, and what you're putting out into the world, and how, like we talked about, right, the ripple effect of what we do goes beyond us. And for you, that ripple is massive. And I celebrate you for that and for showing up. And I also thank you, because now when I get out of bed in the morning, I'm going to step out with my left foot. And I love that you start your day with intentionality, because most people, what happens, the alarm goes off and the first thought is, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. Oh, I don't want to get out of bed, right? You literally change how you step into your day. And what a beautiful tone for your day. And so it's been such a joy to talk to you today. It makes me happy to be able to share happiness research. So thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to chatting with you more, because I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yes. Yeah. And I look forward to that too, because I want to learn from your research, but also the practicality. How do we help people, right?
Yes.
Put that together. Normally it should be a perfect place to end, but I'm going to ask you one last question, because you just
Absolutely.
hit me. What is your morning routine? How do you wake up?
Ooh, okay. So I have like this natural tendency to a type A perfectionist thing. So when morning routines got big a while ago, my morning routine went from like 5 minutes to like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I have to scrape my tongue, and then lemon water, and then meditate, and then journal, and then breath work. And then now I have landed in this comfortable position of, I have intention in my morning. I do not go on my technology at all. That is like a hard no. And my morning routine is different depending on what I want that day. So instead of being like, oh, I have to journal, and then I have to have a tea, and then I wake up and I'm like, how do I want to start my day today? Some days I will just sit and watch the sunrise, like just sit in awe and watch the sunrise. Some days I will read. Some days I will journal. Some days I will write. Some days I will, but I always do something intentional. I also, I really like to take my morning for quiet. I get up early and I love enjoying that time. One of the things that has been new-ish for me is I actually take time in the morning to think.
Yeah.
Think. Because so often I'm learning and I'm teaching and I'm doing research all day, but I need that integration. It's for the morning, the world is quiet. And in the quiet, I can hear my thoughts more. And so I spent a lot of time thinking lately. And I love that, because that's kind of how we process and integrate what we learn. And like you said, the application of knowledge is something that's really important to me, because it's great to do research, but how do you take it from a lab and bring it into the world, into something that's meaningful? And that's where my work is really that translation of knowledge from an academic setting into the real world. And so I really have been taking that time to think.
Well, it reminds me of how precious thinking time is, right? A lot of times in the Western culture, when people are on their computer and just doing stuff, you don't interrupt them because you think they're busy. And in the East, it's just the opposite. When someone is sitting there looking out the window, you wouldn't interrupt them because they're in their thinking time, right? And I visualize your morning, sitting there watching the sun come up, maybe with a cup of tea, maybe not. And what you taught me was you don't have to have this A, B, C, D, linear. Remember, we started this out with you like to think linear, but you're really creative. And that was a beautiful way to sum up everything. What a beautiful morning. I find the same. I like to have as much time as I can, usually about 2 hours to be quiet, to think, to also, exercise and those kinds of things, but in a beautiful way, right? So then I found that some mornings I only have 4 minutes and I can do it then too.
Yes.
I can do it in 4 minutes. I don't need 2 hours. I know how to turn that switch on. So
one last thing that just popped in my mind that I want to share really quickly. When we were just talking about this, something that happened to me recently that has like fundamentally changed how I see the world. And I can't believe, like, because I told you earlier how I read all this research and I try on all the things like gratitude. For some reason, I read about awe, like AWE, awe, in research. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. But I never like integrated it. It didn't like land. You know how like that idea, like sometimes you're not ready to hear something, right? So I never in my talks gave awe as a tip. I didn't understand it. And then a couple months ago in December, I was invited to the ROM, which is the Royal Ontario Museum. It's this big, beautiful museum in Toronto. And it has like everything from the dinosaurs. It's like our big museum.
Yeah.
And they were opening a new exhibit called The Dawn of Life. So it was from the beginning of life up until the dinosaurs. Yeah. So a lot of fossils and that kind of thing. And so I was invited to the ribbon cutting and I went. And so it was closed to the public. So everybody that was there contributed to this exhibit that they've been working on for almost 10 years. Wow. So paleo artists, graphic designers, researchers, people that work with 3D printing to like print and hand glue the little fossil, everything, like these little sea creatures. And I was talking to all these people who had basically been working for a decade on this exhibit. And so very cool. And then I walked by this rock. There was this rock at the front. You could actually touch it. And it said like, touch this rock. And I'm like, okay, so I touched the rock. And then below it, it says, this rock is 4 billion years old. It is one of the oldest living things on this earth. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I walk by and then I'm like, hold on a second. I go back, touch the rock. And I'm like, 4 billion years old. And I couldn't get my mind around that.
Hey.
And I was like, oh my goodness, this is awe. When your mind it's when you go out and you look at the stars and you realize how big the world is, it gives you context. And now I see the world through the lens of awe. I am in awe of every sunrise that happens and how different it is. Every sunset. I'm in awe of how my dog plays, and like awe fundamentally changed and opened up my perspective of how I see the world. And it has been we talked about the lens that we see. When we start to have an appreciation for that, it's a game changer. So that's something for me that has had such a personal thing. So, whether it be tonight going out and looking at the stars, or, looking at, turning on the tap and watching the water come out and think about how does that happen, right? All of these things.
Yes.
When we see the world through the lens of awe, it gives us an appreciation and a different perspective of things. So that I just wanted to share because it has been such a game changer for me. And awe can be in anything. I am in awe of this conversation and in awe of you to be able to have this. So thank you so much. It has been such a joy. I am very grateful to chat with you.
Gillian, it's so precious. We just titled the podcast, Let Me See the World Through the Lens of Awe. That's it. That's the title. I so appreciate what you're going through now. Left foot forward, right? And
that's it.
Today is a sense of awe. So,
and I'm glad to be here.
Also, one last thing I'll share with you. I was actually interviewing somebody, and they're in our podcast. I can't remember, but his book is Awe. Awe, A-H-A, not awe. And he had a thing that, the reason Michelangelo and in the Sistine Chapel, they paint those paintings up high is when we look up, there is this sense of awe that we can create, right? You think about all the idea of looking up to Jesus or any of these things, right? But it also opens up our throat. And that gives us this, the chakra there, the sense of awe. And I actually like to open up my arms too. And I do this every morning as part of my routine. I go outside and I say, and just try to take in that awe. So thank you for sharing that. That's a blessing.
I love that, especially when we're so internally rotated all the time, right? To open up.
Open up, just do the opposite.
Beautiful.
Yeah, may I be available. That's what I said today. May I be available for whoever needs me, whoever I'm going to do it. I was looking forward to talking to you, but I had no idea that it would be this amazing. Hey, how can people get a hold of you the best? What's your website? How your research, all the things that you do out there?
Yeah, my website's a great hub. It's gillianmandich.com, and I'm Gillian with a G. So it's GILLIANMANDICH. And all the links to all my things are there. So that's a good place to go.
Well, we're going to make sure we get in the show notes. Thank you so much. This has been a sense of awe. Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you.